Hi there, my name is Yasmine Naghdi and I'm a principal ballerina with the Royal Ballet.
I tried not to look at your pictures too closely because whenever I do these point shoe hacks, I love to be surprised. I did see that you wear block, but I didn't like try to figure out which block you wore. So what kind of point shoes do you wear?
I wear custom-made point shoes, but I think they are closest to the heritage styles and the serenade styles. And when I was at school, at the Royal Ballet School, upper school, I wore serenade point shoes, and I really liked them. But then when I got to the company, I found that I was sort of slipping and sliding because they're really a really hard shoe. And
Yes.
obviously, I didn't want the embarrassment of always falling around in the studio and being pointed and stared at. And so I've got a custom made shoe now that looks like this.
Okay. So the bottom definitely looks like a heritage, but can I
Yes,
see the front of it?
heritage.
Yes.
And the front is, it's got
Looks
quite
like
a
a
long
serenade.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
on the side as well. And then it's got, I get a 3/4 sole underneath here. So you can see it stops there.
Yes.
I have this layer on top that I need to glue down because when I start sweating in my shoes, this inside layer starts rolling up underneath. And I had one performance where I was doing Kitri and Donkyu in Japan, and because of the heat there and the humidity, even having glued it down like 3 times, it
Oh
started
yeah.
rolling underneath my foot. And of course, that's just such a gut-wrenching feeling of feeling this lump underneath the bottom of your foot. And I was doing fortes on that foot, and I was just like,
Oh no.
God help me get this. So I always make sure I glue it down really well.
It's so interesting because when you said you wore the Serenades, I was like, that is a really hard shoe. Plus, it has a really long vamp, and then the
Yes,
Heritage is actually the shortest vamp. So like the vamp, you kept the Serenade length, and then the bottom, the shank kind of looks like a Heritage to me.
yeah,
Um,
it
so
is a heritage shank. Yeah.
yeah, so you have the Heritage shank with the Serenade box, and then you
Yes.
three-quarter it.
So I met with Bob Martin and he measured my foot and I told him what I want from the shoe and how I'd like it slightly to dip a little bit here. And then this is the 6th version of the shoe that we tried. So at first there was too little on the heel. When I wore it, the heel would slip off. And of course, that's every ballerina's nightmare of a heel slipping off mid-show. And then I've got quite long toes. So I really like to feel like the shoe is hugging my foot. I like to feel comfortable in there. So that's why I like the long vamp. And also I hate it when you've got this crabbing look in a point shoe. That's why I think a longer vamp supports the toes a little better. And so I worked with Bob Martin over time to kind of find the perfect shoe. And I think your feet always change, right? So probably in time I'll say, oh, can you tweak this here and tweak this there? And but I really like this shoe and I love this platform. I feel really gives me a solid base to balance and turn in. So I really love that feeling of the shoe hugging my foot comfortably with the 3/4 underneath as well. And the reason why I chose the heritage sole shank is because initially I started with the standard block shank. And I found that with ballets like Giselle, for example, where you're balancing on that one foot and you're doing a lot of promenades and you've got that one leg up, I found my foot was really rolling and the bottom started rounding a little bit when they got warmer. So I found that having a heritage sole gives me a wider platform to balance in. So when I'm standing on one foot, you know, for balancing and stuff, it was a lot more comfortable.
Yes, a lot of point shoes because they have so many layers of different materials. It has that kind of boat feeling of like teetering back and forth. So some point shoes
Exactly.
are definitely flatter than others. And I think it actually, if you're not able to find your ground, it's actually pretty bad on your ankles. After all those years of teetering back and forth, it puts so much strain on your ankles. So I think a lot of ballerinas don't really realize that, or dancers in training don't realize that, and then they have problems later on that you can accumulate.
What I tried once when I got these custom shoes, I thought, okay, let me take out the sole completely, just this top layer, and see how my foot responds. I kind of Stanley knifed the 3/4 because it's a very harsh cut. So just 3/4, you know, sort of cut it away. And then I was doing a variation of Sylvia, which at the end you have these releves on one foot. And I remember halfway through feeling that the shank was cutting the underneath of my foot, and I had this big blister. It's the worst. Underneath your foot is the worst place to have a big blister like that. So I learned my lesson the hard way. So I know that I do need something cushioning the bottom of that. So I use this Copydex glue, which is quite hard. So the night before, I'll Copydex the sole and then put a chair on top of it to glue it down. For performances, I also Stanley knife the bottoms to make them even more flat. And then I score them with a shoe scratcher to get more friction so I don't slip. Because again, that's every dancer's worst nightmare.
Yes, that's right. I always find it amazing when certain dancers will just 3/4 the shank and then just leave it there and then like don't even put anything over it. I'm like, doesn't that bother you so much? It's so crazy. But some people just don't get blisters. It's like a skin type thing, I think.
It's a skin type thing, and it's also the shape of their foot. It just doesn't bother them by that curve. So but I found out the hard way that my foot doesn't like that.
Yeah. Do you have a left and a right shoe?
I tend to put them on, do some turns, do some balances, change the shoe, see if it's any better. And also you tend to see like whether there's a slightly wider part, or if you're sickling, you're favoring the outside, then I swap shoes because it's better to be more on the big toe than on the outside. So it's trial and error in finding which is left and which is right.
I see that you darned your pointe shoe, but do you do anything else?
Yes, so my process is I sew a crisscross elastic. I really like these, they're very, very strong. So I sew the elastic with the ribbon in the same place, and I sew it just behind the seam. And then I sew the bottom either side of this seam, and I find that works for me, the crisscross here. And then what I do is, other than gluing this part down, I also cut some of the sole away, because then it gives me a higher chance that it rolls if I don't cut this away. So I cut a little bit away, and then you can exposes the bottom of the shoe with all the sewing and the glue. And then I will darn. So I do a first layer all the way around, and then I do a second layer just on the top. And I find it adds a little bit of life to the platform of the shoe. And also I find it just helps me find my balance a little bit better.
If you know exactly where your foot falls, it's so great to have a little bit of more enforcement in a place where you need it. So some dancers will do the double darning on the other side of the platform because they know that they fall back, so they want to be tilted forward. You must have longer toes that are very flexible because you need the longer vamp and you need the reinforcement in the top of the platform. So it's nice to know that you have the same size and the same cut in the 3/4 shank on both feet.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Do you have a favorite foot that you like to balance or turn on?
Yes, so I'm a right turner, so I'll favor turning on the left leg, and the calf on my left side is definitely bigger than my right, so that's a giveaway sign that I've been practicing fouettes for years on that side. And then I like to balance actually on the right foot. So it's, I don't know if that's normal or not, but like things like swan lake, I balance on the right foot. With Sleeping Beauty, it's obviously on the right foot. But then the turns on the left, so that's quite funny to think of it that way, but it probably works quite well because I think it gives you a break. You know, you've got the fouettes on the left, so you're balancing on the right, and swan lake especially is so left leg heavy. Everything's, you know, all those like rond de jambes and everything is on that left leg, so it's good to give it a little break in that balance.
Absolutely. I would love to see the pointe shoes on you. Is that possible?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I have these custom, they look quite gross now, but they're a custom toe spacer. We put our toes, they mold it, and then you get your toe spacer. And it's always heartbreaking when you lose a toe spacer because they're kind of molded exactly to the shape of your toe. And then I wear the classic kind of cotton and jelly toe pads. And sometimes when I was performing in Japan, I found my feet were quite swollen because of the heat. So I then used animal wool toe pads, which break down really nicely to being almost like a piece of cloth when you put your pointe shoes on eventually.
You know, I see this all the time, even different parts of the country or the world, because the temperature and the humidity is so different in different places. Your shoes are different and your feet are different. So your shoes break down faster, your feet are smaller, your feet are more swollen. So it's very difficult when you get people from out of town coming in to get pointe shoe fitting, because I'm like, I don't know what your feet are going to do when you get back home. But I guess it's the same problem with you when you travel to perform.
Yeah, it's always a little bit stressful, especially if it's hot and humid.
How quickly do you go through your shoes?
I think I'm quite good with the way I go through my shoes. I think if I think of an average week, let's say with one performance of Sleeping Beauty and then sort of rehearsals for leading up to that and then an upcoming triple bill, I'd probably go through, so I would go through 2 pairs of pointe shoes for Sleeping Beauty. I'd use 1 pair for Act 1, which is quite hard, and then they're very broken down for Act 2. And then I'll change for Act 3 to have a slightly harder shoe for that Grand Pas de Deux. So 2 shoes for a performance of Sleeping Beauty, and then I would say maybe 2 to 3 pairs for a week of rehearsals, including a Saturday, for example. So what I like to do is I love to wear super hard shoes for class, because that's where I break them in for rehearsals for the rest of the day. And I feel like with a hard shoe, you can turn and balance much better. So I tend to feel better about myself in class when I wear a hard shoe. And then, yeah, I'd break in the shoes that I'd use for the performance in that class in the morning. Good.
Beautiful. Okay, and so, these are how old?
These are, I mean, I've worn these for 2 sort of classes on my own. So they, as you can see, they bend in a really, I love the sort of how high they bend.
I was going to say, that is a very high 3/4. Oh, yeah. So you do go over your shoes really far. Yeah. So that darning in the front, gorgeous. Oh my gosh.
Nice shoes. I really like these. And I also, I don't know if you can see on the video, but I've got super suede back legs.
Yes. Yes.
So
oh my God.
Again,
oh my God.
It's good to have that support.
So it's interesting. Your right foot is a little bit more flexible, but because your leg does sway back, it almost like counterbalances you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I actually sprained my left ankle last year on holiday, and it looks completely different. It's hard to see on here, but now I've got 2 ankles. I've got one that's a little more puffy around here because I badly sprained this ligament here, while as I have a clearer definition on this ankle.
Isn't it interesting how long the swelling lasts after you hurt it?
Oh my gosh, it's nearly a year now.
You know, it's usually it's the other side that most dancers roll. How did you hurt that side?
Never got an injury dancing on stage, incredibly, my whole career. And I was on holiday in Spain, and we went to this beautiful beach where there are like loads of sort of rocks and boulders. And I had a bad fall. And for this to be my first proper injury through not dancing, it was really frustrating. So of course I missed out on that opportunity to guest in Russia, and I missed a few performances at the Royal Opera House. But at the same time, I felt still very lucky, because I know a lot of my colleagues had things like knee injuries that take a whole year, or shin splints, things like this that take so much longer. So in actual fact, I was only out for kind of 2 months of our season, so it really wasn't that bad. I pay great importance to having good nutrition and looking after my body, having a good rest. So I feel like my body looked after itself very well, and I made a good recovery. But in all honesty, it took about 6 months until I could fouette comfortably. That was the hardest thing. to get back is to be able to do consistent releves on one foot whilst turning. You know, having, as soon as you land, you've got that torsion on the ankle. That was the hardest thing to get back, and obviously the most important thing you have to be able to do as a principal dancer. You learn so much when you have an injury about yourself and about your coping mechanisms, and I think it is an occupational hazard to get an injury at some point in your career. So it just depends how you cope with that, and hopefully it's not anything too serious, but it's a good learning curve.
Good luck to you. Thank you so much for your time again.
You too. Sending lots of love.